When I was a kid years ago, we heard stories of a little boy ghost that haunted my grandparents' place. Stories like how they would hear my cousin's toys moving around at night, or find his tricycle not where it was left. My uncle was renovating the basement one day by himself, and was going back to the house with some lumber. He looked up at the house, and the little boy was looking at him through the window. When I was about 11 or 12, I was in the kitchen eating a sandwich and drinking a pop, and my little cousin was about 6 or 7, and he was drawing on a piece of paper on the floor. His back was to the basement stairs, and he was crouched over drawing away. I was watching him, and all of a sudden, a little boy, about 4 years old, came tiptoeing up the steps, and he stood behind my cousin and was leaning over him, watching what he was drawing. When he was doing this, he had his hands behind his back leaning over, and then he turned and looked at me and smiled and ran down the hallway. When he got to the bathroom, he disappeared. I remember he was bow-legged and pigeon-toed by the way his feet swept back when he ran away. Also, he wore tight blue jeans that went above his ankles, navy blue socks, and a striped tight t-shirt. I'm a Native American from Alberta, Canada, and this little boy was Caucasian. We had heard stories about an old man and a little boy that were buried in unmarked graves nearby. The land, before my family lived there, was used to travel to a trading post that used to be near us. My grandparents were eventually tired of the stories, and they prayed over the home, and we never saw him again. My junior year of college, I was staying in the dorms in the city of Boston when I became interested in the occult for the first time. I started reading the Lesser Key of Solomon, and I stopped at Sitri, feeling a connection. But that's not who visited me that night. After reading for hours, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I saw a black mass of particles. I have no idea how else to describe it. It looked like a cloud of black dots. And it spoke. It said,
"Will you be mine?"
It was seductive, and I was terrified. I said, "No." It asked why, and I replied, "I don't even know you." I was shaking, scared out of my mind, and then the particles were gone. I believe in demons partly because of this. It was one of the best moments of my life, and honestly, I'm grateful I saw it. It was beautiful, but so scary, but worth the fear. Demons exist. Who would have thought it? Last night, a storm broke out of nowhere, and it wasn't that long, but the wind was insanely strong. After the storm, at around 11 p.m. or 2300, a sound could be heard all around the city. The sound was like a metal bang, just like someone hitting a metal wall with a hammer. But the sound continued in the same rhythm for at least 40 minutes, with the same pause between every bang, around a second maybe. Several people talked about it, and some even had videos. Even a radio station posted on social media about it, and later said that it came from a local salt factory that was releasing steam. I'm no expert, but it didn't sound like that to me. Does anyone know what this is? I have died around 7 times. I'm talking heart no longer beating, skin and lips blue, no longer breathing, dead on the floor or ground, with people scrambling and attempting to bring me back. Of course, I was brought back every time. Otherwise, I wouldn't be posting this. You may wonder how this could be, but it's pretty simple. I'm a heroin junkie. I have OD'd more times than I can count, but at least 7 of those times, I was actually dead before being brought back to life. The last time I overdosed, May 17, 2020, I was told by the responding officer that I had been dead for almost 15 minutes. I had been in my car in a fast food restaurant parking lot, and luckily, someone saw me and called 911. I remember doing my shot, and the next thing I know, I'm on the ground, covered in my own piss, with officers and paramedics swarming around me. I was told that they didn't think they were going to be able to bring me back, that they gave me 5 hits of nasal Narcan to no avail, so they inserted an IV and administered the Narcan that way, and I finally woke up. I signed the paperwork to avoid going to the hospital, left my car in the parking lot, and proceeded to walk home. The whole way there, I kept thinking about my experience. This was the longest amount of time I had ever been dead, but just like all the other times, I saw and experienced nothing while dead. No white light, no angels or demons, or a river to cross. Just nothing. It was like I was asleep and then woke up again. Have any of you had a similar or even different experience? I'm curious to know if anyone else has had an experience like mine, or something else entirely. Thanks for listening. This story is definitely going to be hard to believe, but it's 100% true. It's a story that I've told very few people in real life, because I know how crazy it sounds. I know people here have had weird experiences too, and a lot of you know more about folklore and entities than I do. Hopefully, some of you can help explain what I saw. I'd love to hear your theories. This occurred when I was 11 or 12. I'm 28 now, and I was staying the night at my friend Danny's house, who lived just a few houses down from mine. There was a large pond behind our neighborhood, and we spent a lot of time there growing up. We go fishing, ride bikes, explore the small forest, etc. But we really enjoyed catching turtles and tree frogs. It might sound weird, but what can I say? We had somewhat of an obsession with reptiles and amphibians. Another thing I should note is that there's an old Native American trail that went through the backyards on our street. It wasn't the Trail of Tears, but it was related to it in some way. I don't really remember. Back to the story. I was up late playing video games with Danny, and after a while, we wanted to do something else. It was close to midnight, but we decided to go out and try catching some tree frogs. A family that lived in a nearby house had gone on vacation, and they had a perfect backyard for catching frogs. We hopped their fence and started exploring. Almost immediately, I started getting a weird feeling. I had the feeling we were being watched, or something was nearby, and there was this odd energy in the air. I don't really know how to explain it, but something just felt off. I remember feeling afraid, but I had no reason to be. We had done this kind of thing many times before, and it never inspired fear. About 10 minutes in, we thought we could hear the frog saying "help me" in a croaky, froggy voice, over and over again. The weird thing was, we couldn't see any tree frogs with our flashlights, and the yard wasn't that big. They started chanting in unison, and that made it much louder. Feeling more than a little creeped out, we bolted out of there and back to the street. Now, we were standing under a streetlight on the street corner across from where the frog house was. I looked up at the light and noticed at least 15 dragonflies attached to each other like a human centipede. They were all doing a spiraling motion as they flew closer and closer to the light. It was weird. So, we heard and saw 2 unusual things, but you could possibly explain them away. What happened next, however, made absolutely zero fucking sense. After the dragonflies did their thing and flew away, Danny and I remained standing under that streetlight. We began talking about the strangeness of the frogs in particular. We both heard them croaking the same phrase, and we were pretty much just saying what the fuck was that about. At some point during the conversation, I was instantly overcome with the most intense adrenaline rush that I've ever had in my life. That feeling of fear without a source while at the frog house was back. but much, much stronger. It was like my fight or flight response was signaled for no reason. Once again, everything felt off, and it felt like there was an intense energy all around us, making the air heavy. I was terrified, and I found out later my buddy was feeling the same thing. I became as still as possible, listening intently to my surroundings. I didn't hear anything unusual, but I suddenly began to feel drawn to look at the street behind me. I knew something was there. Whatever was behind me was the source of my fear, and it was putting out overwhelming energy with its presence alone. I hesitantly turned around and looked. A side note, I have full-body goosebumps just recalling this. In the middle of the street, about 20 yards away from us, there was an ordinary-looking 5 to 7-year-old girl with long, dark black hair wearing a white nightgown. She was sitting Indian style on the street pavement with a doll on her lap, and she was combing the doll's hair with a hairbrush. I was pretty much terrified beyond imagination. I was frozen with fear and could barely think straight. There was an incredible amount of energy in the air, and I knew something wasn't natural. She looked innocent enough, but I felt like she could snap me in half with the snap of her fingers if she really wanted to. Another creepy detail was that she never even looked at us. She kept her head down and focused on her doll, but she definitely knew that we were watching her. After what felt like an hour, realistically, probably 15 to 30 seconds, a car turned onto the street and began heading down the hill toward the girl. I remember the headlights getting brighter and brighter as it approached her. You would think maybe I would try to save her real quick, but I legitimately couldn't move. Also, I didn't really expect her to get hit for some reason. I never felt like she was in any sort of danger. Eventually, she became lost in the car's headlights, never looking up from her doll this whole time, by the way, and the car just passed right through her without any sound of a collision. It stopped at the stop sign 15 feet from us and made a right turn. We took our eyes off of where the girl was as we watched the car turn. When we looked back to where the girl had been, she was gone. Instead, there was a dog on the sidewalk, precisely parallel to where the girl was sitting in the street. The dog was looking right at me when I noticed it, almost like it was waiting for me to see it. Then, it just turned around and trotted up the hill in the other direction. After a few seconds, the shock wore off and we sprinted back to Danny's house and spent half the night looking out his second-story window toward the street. I don't know what I saw, but Danny saw the exact same thing. I've always felt like there was a reason it happened, or a reason it showed itself, whatever it was, to us of all people. Last thing, the house in front of where the girl was seen was haunted. I lived on that street for 10 years, and 4 or 5 different families lived in the haunted house during those 10 years. All of them said it was haunted. I have a couple stories about that too, but this is already way longer than I wanted it to be. Anyway, thanks for listening if you made it this far. Please let me know if you have any theories on my experience. It was a sunny evening in 2012, probably late June. I had just graduated high school after a turbulent 4 years, and my parents let me throw a little get-together in the backyard with friends and family to celebrate. In total, including myself and immediate family, it was probably 15 to 20 people tops. My dad had just finished grilling all the food, and everyone had moved inside to a small screened-in porch area to eat, just in case it started getting buggy. Cliche, here's where it gets weird part. Everyone was just sitting around, eating and talking, and in good spirits. Suddenly, the sky gets very, very overcast. I live in an area where sudden storms aren't really a thing, and it didn't feel humid, so it didn't seem like a rainstorm of any kind. It was as though someone switched the sky to a flat gray when it had been cloudless and sunny just moments before. As soon as I noticed how gray the sky had suddenly become, A horrendously loud noise rang out across the sky. It sounded like a passenger jet engine was landing in our backyard. A hush fell across the entire group, and everyone looked nervously at each other. No one said a word, even my dad, a 6-foot-something Norwegian raised by Air Force vets, looked seriously, genuinely rattled, a look that I had never seen on him before, and never have since. The even stranger part? It passed as quickly as it came, and no one spoke about it once the clouds lifted. It was as though time had frozen during the moment, and then everyone went back to normal. Well, sort of. The rest of the night just felt strangely off. Like everyone acted kind of robotic. Like actors in a play or NPC characters. The air felt tense. No one I've spoken to remembers it. Not my parents, my friends, my family members that were there. Even my sister, who remembers what she wore the first day of kindergarten, doesn't seem to remember. Even weirder is that I forgot about it until just now. I only remembered now that my parents are selling the house. I'm sitting alone in an empty house in that exact spot, and the memory just came flooding right back. I remember rushing to the window with my friends to try and get a look, but I straight up don't even remember if I saw anything or not, which freaks me out that my memory is so spotty. Has anyone else experienced anything similar, or have an idea about what happened?